Good morning, class. I thought I'd do a brief video about weeks 5 through 6. We're getting into uh, basically the process analysis essay, which would be your essay 3. We will talk a little bit about that. Hopefully, you had a chance to look in your weekly folder to see some of the essay 3 topics. Really, the process analysis essay should be a lot easier than most of the previous 2 essays. If you had a little bit of trouble with your narration, which was essay 1, of course, or description, which you just turned in this past Sunday. Essay 3, if you think about, directional process analysis or operational process analysis, which is really the 2 different directions you can take this particular assignment, it should be a little easier to write. We will look at some of the topics, maybe give you some general guidelines of how to approach it. If you think of like reading a manual or learning how to put something together, let's say like a baby crib or how to change your oil in your car, those would give you, it's more or less like a how-to video, but you're basically doing it on paper or you're typing it out. But I can show you one particular example that I have. There should be another example in your e-textbook as well. In a couple of weeks, we will probably be talking a little bit more about this maybe next week. Your essay 4 is going to be your midterm essay. And I know we're sort of jumping ahead, but I want to kind of give you some overview. Essay 4 is going to be it's going to be a definition essay, extended definition essay. I'm going to give you 2 pieces of reading to kind of review. You can kind of use those in your essay if you need to, but you don't necessarily have to. It's just up to you. It's going to be a respondus exam. Because this class is strictly online, and this really goes with all your other online classes. So if you're taking strictly online classes, you're going to have to do a respondus, event or an exam for them too. Your instructor should be reaching out if they're going to do it as a midterm or a final or something of that nature. But basically what you're going to have to do for essay 4 is you're going to have to download the Respondus app, and we can work through that a little bit more next week or so. And you're going to have only 60 minutes to type your essay 4 from start to finish. You don't have any chances to send me a draft. You don't have any peer review sessions for essay 4. There's no tutor.com. It's you, whenever you start the exam, you got to type for 60 minutes. On that particular topic. And again, we will talk a little bit more about essay 4, which would be your midterm essay, your respondus event here in another week or two. There is a specific time frame that you have to do that. I can't reopen a respondus exam because the college pays for each student that takes one of those. So if you miss out on that particular event, you're just going to have to eat the 0, unfortunately. So hopefully you don't miss that. Again, we'll talk a little bit more in the coming weeks, but I just wanted to throw that out. You should be probably getting some emails from the college, that type deal about respondus. If this is not your first time taking a strict, 100% online course, you've probably done a respondus type exam last semester or in the past. You sort of know what the deal is. If this is your first time, we will, walk you through it, give you some guidance, guidelines, that type stuff. But going back to focus what essay 3 needs to be, essay 3 is sort of going to help you to some degree as it relates to the length of the paper, because essay 3, I believe when I look at the topics here momentarily, I think it only needs to be 2 to 3 pages. So that essay 4 that you're going to have to do basically in one setting only really needs to be 2 to 3 pages. So as it relates to the length on the word count, this is going to kind of help you balance sort of your time management and, as it relates to organization and paper length and that type deal. There is a union assignment on keeping notebook that's due on the 11th. I realize that this weekend is a Super Bowl weekend for some of y'all. That's going to have the parties and everything. If you don't want to have something to worry about because you're going to be busy, either, at a restaurant, at a bar, Super Bowl tailgate party, whatever the case may be. If you're into that stuff, I would just get it done before Sunday, right? You don't have to wait to Sunday to turn this stuff in. You can get it done today, tomorrow, Friday, Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning. You don't have to wait until Sunday, because I know if you really like watching the games last, go from what, 6:30 to 10:30, 11 o'clock. By the time you go through all that, and you've already ate, I had a couple, maybe adult beverages or whatever that may be. You're exhausted by the time. It's like you've actually were in the game itself. So if you don't want to wait until the last minute to get stuff done, just obviously the Dropbox is there. You can get it submitted before then. We will talk a little bit about on keeping a notebook. I think it's a pretty fascinating piece. I think it's still sort of relevant today, even though we do a lot of the notebooking maybe now via text, via Facebook, X, Instagram, that type deal. We may not know that we're doing notebook type deal, but we are. It's just a different way of looking at it compared to, let's say that you were 5 or 6 years old. Especially if you're female, you probably remember the lock and key with the notebook. My daughters have those. They still sort of use those from time to time. Um, if masculine for a male, you have a different way of keeping track of your thoughts. Sometimes it's through photographs, sometimes it's through collections of magazines or whatever the case may be. It's not necessarily you're exposing your thoughts on paper all the time, but there's a different way for men to sort of do that as well. The good thing about that particular piece, though, it sort of blends in the last several rhetorical modes. It has a story, there's narration, it has a little bit of description into it. It does sort of have a process analysis feel to it. So it's sort of blending in the last 5 or 6 weeks worth of rhetorical modes that we've been learning into one piece. And the whole you know, the reason why I do these weekly readings, one is you usually have one like week 5 where you have a small assignment to. The one that comes after is usually just there for more or less guidance to give you something else. I mean, you can read it. You don't necessarily have to read it. I mean, there's not a question or, assignment connected to it. It's just to show you another piece, sometimes of a professional writer that basically dealing with our particular topic for those 2 weeks. So you may have another one next week that has a process analysis feel to it. Again, it's just there for your enrichment, especially if you're trying to get inspiration on how to go about writing a process analysis. But there's never usually, unless I tell you otherwise, you're not going to have a particular question or something connected to the one that comes after the one that you have a question to, if that makes sense. All right, so let me show you, let me get over here to share my screen. And we will look at, so at this point, you should see your week 5 folder. That's basically where I'm at. Obviously, you have some information about how to write a process essay. I would probably watch this video and read those pages, but I'm going to show you also here. This is sort of a structure. Now I can email this out. I haven't really emailed this out. I just sort of found this not too long ago, but this is, I think, is a really short, it's to the point. So structuring a process analysis essay. A process essay describes a series of steps or events. You can call it methods. You can call it, sections, whatever the case may be. A coherent essay requires a clear purpose or unifying idea. So again, you still need to have an introduction. Your last sentence of that introduction needs to be your thesis statement, which is basically going to be your main idea of that entire paper. And you will have a conclusion as well. Now, as it gets to the body paragraphs of this, you have a little bit of choice depending on how you want to style it. There are 2 basic types of process analysis, which we sort of talked about here momentarily: directional, how to do something, and informational or operational, how something works. So if you think of directional essay, it sort of lends its name to itself, provides directions to achieve a particular result. So one way that you can think of, or one topic you can think of, how to cook perfect grits. So think of recipes as being directional process analysis. So every time that you use a recipe, you're actually doing a process analysis. You got to follow the steps, right? You got to go from step one to step two to step three. What happens if you go from step one to step five? You're probably going to screw up whatever recipe is. So that's the same, process with your particular essay. You don't want to skip steps. Um, Google Maps or MapQuest or your navigation system in your car, if you're fortunate to have one of those, that's another directional because it's telling you step one, step two, step three. It's taking you, like if you're giving directions from your house to Disney World, it will give you a series of directions or steps that you would have to take to get from your house to Disney World. So that's another way that you can kind of look at it. Uh, an informational or a operational process analysis explains something for the reader. So in one way, how a rocket engine works. So you're not giving me the steps of how it works. You're just explaining how the darn thing works. So think about um, oil, motor oil in your truck or car. If you don't have oil in your engine, what's going to happen to your engine? Well, eventually it's going to lock up, shut down, could blow up. Especially if you don't clean the oil, have regular, oil changes. So you can talk about that. You could talk about maybe how an engine works, car engine works, or a lawnmower engine works. You could talk about how a cell phone works, if you can get, deep enough into it. Usually for me in the past, where I see a lot of folks do really well with this assignment, they do the directional essay because, most folks like to cook. So they just give me grandma's favorite spaghetti or best spaghetti in the world. They just go through the motions and give me the steps. Sometimes they give me directions like from their house to their work. You have a lot of different ways to approach this. As it says here, there are three basic steps to writing a process essay. Divide the process. That's number one, obviously. Have a clear purpose. Divide the process into basic, well-defined steps, usually following a time order. An outline will help you organize the paper. Now, some of my online or in-class students are doing their essay three sort of as their in-class essay. It's sort of taking the place of the respondents because they meet with me twice a week. So they're actually doing this as an in-class essay. So they're only going to have an hour to type theirs out. So what I would suggest and what I'm suggesting for them to bring, because they can't bring a rough draft already, is that they make an outline of what they, going to go from step one to step two to step three. So I would recommend if you didn't do an outline for essay one or essay two, I would go ahead and maybe start thinking about using an outline for this particular essay because it'll keep you sort of in check. You won't be going all over the place. You would go from point A to point B to point C if you're going to do a directional essay. And it would probably make things a lot easier when you come to actually typing a draft and then maybe sending me or tutor.com a draft. We will probably have a peer review session next week with this. Again, this paper, I believe, only needs to be 2 to 3 pages. So think of it as being 500 to 750 words. We'll double check that, but I believe that's how it's going to work itself out. Second step, you want to have effective transitions. Using transition words help clarify a process analysis essay. Phrases such as then, next, after, doing, this helps the reader follow your steps. You can go to Google and type in transitional words and phrases for process analysis essays, and you will probably have a treasure chest of words that you can use. Do you need to use all of them? Do you need to remember all of them? No, but you probably want to have several throughout your paragraphs. It would just, sometimes when you look at essay one and when I get a chance to grade essay two, you may see something of, in note that says use better transitions from one sentence or one paragraph to the next. That's what I'm talking about, using transition words. So you're not having like a hard break. You're going from one idea to the next without really having any segue in. Transition words give you that segue in between two ideas. or 2 sentences. You don't have to have every sentence as a transition word. I wouldn't, but think of it like salt and pepper. You need a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper on your food. Too much is going to ruin it. So you don't need to, over salt it or put over too much pepper on something. You just need to give me a pinch here, a pinch there, a pinch, everywhere as it relates to these transitional words. Last step, examine the process. Essay step by step, looking for possible omissions, for example, for a recipe. So again, don't skip steps. Think about if you're changing transmission fluid in a truck. If you skip steps, anybody that basically picks up your paper or your manual, whatever you want to call it, tries to change their own transmission in their truck, and you go from step 1 to step 5, and you leave out step 2, 3, and 4, then if they don't really know what they're doing, even though you may know what you're doing, but they read your paper, you don't know what you're doing, they can screw up their transmission. And then that's where they want to come back and, hey, I read your work, I read your paper, you published this in a magazine, or you posted it on YouTube as a how-to video. Now I want to either sue you or sue your company because you misled me by omitting, 3 important steps. And you're going to have those people that would like to do that. I mean, there's folks that go out there and basically they look for this stuff. They want to try to get injured, or they want to try to get something messed up or broken so they can come back and sue you. It's a sad reality that we live in, but we do have people that, they make that their full-time job. To see how many people they can screw and sue in a day, which is really unfortunate, honestly. But anyway, if you look, this is it's basically not double spaced, but had this particular essay been double spaced, you're probably looking at least 3 pages here. It follows, right? This is actually doing a process analysis of how the essay writing process works. So you could use that as a topic. We do have a title. Notice the title doesn't need to be underlined. I do see a lot of folks that are bold facing, they're italicizing, they're putting quotes, they're doing all kinds of weird crap to their title. The title needs to be in the same size and font as the rest of your paper. You don't have to underline it. You don't have to put a period after it. You don't have to put a semicolon, colon. You don't have to italicize it. You don't have to need to make this font, 20 and everything else 12. Leave it just like the rest of the writing. As you can tell here, this is the same font and size as this. Again, you will need to have an introduction paragraph. Being that this only needs to be about 2 to 3 pages, you don't need to have a really lengthy introduction or a lengthy conclusion. I would say this one has what, 1, 2, 3, 4. I would say probably for your introduction and your conclusion, probably have about 5 sentences each. That should be enough. Make sure that that last sentence in your introduction is your thesis statement. As you can tell here, 5 basic steps will allow a writer to achieve the best possible outcome when trying to develop an essay. So right there, we're going to have 5 additional paragraphs that's going to talk about these steps. So you can kind of go about it that way, right? This is more or less like a directional essay. We have the first body paragraph. It starts with a transitional word first. Notice usually when you use a transitional word at the beginning of the sentence, you have a comma after that. So we have this is telling us the first thing that you need to do when it comes to achieving the best possible outcome for writing the perfect essay. Now we go to step 2. Notice it says next, step 2. It actually lists the steps. You could say step first, step 1, and go that way if you wanted to. Notice step 3, another transition words. Notice we have some transition words throughout, right? We have this sort of concluding sentence here in the second body paragraph that is actually foreshadowing the next step, right? Next step being step 3. We get that also here in the last sentence or so in the third body paragraph, where we start to get into step 4. And then again, we have step 5. And as you can tell, we have a conclusion, which again, the conclusion, the final paragraph summarizes the main idea of that particular thesis statement. The other thing that this is really missing is sort of the header, your last name or mine, your first name, last name, my name, the course number, the date. And then some folks are still not putting their actual last name and page numbers in the top right-hand corner of every page. So sometimes y'all are losing points on your essay for the format. If it's not double spaced, if you're not indenting your paragraphs, if you don't have the header on just page one, if you don't have an essay title, some of you are just giving me blank essays with blank titles. Some of y'all are not having your last name like Wilson 2 or Smith 9. The page, your last name and your page number. So some of y'all are just losing points for that. So make sure that you're using the MLA format. I did have a video of that back in like week 1 and week 2. Um, since then, I'm pretty sure that folder has closed down, but you can go to YouTube and type in MLA9 essay format, and you will find millions of videos that will help you format your essay into the right particular format so you're not losing points from essay 1 to essay 2 to essay 3. Because if you're screwing up the format, then you're already missing the same points from essay 1 to essay 2. You're going to probably do the same thing for essay 3 if you haven't fixed it. So I would go back and kind of look at that if you're having issues with your points. All right, let's see here. I don't want to do all of that. So we're going to click out of that. We're going to go back to content. So again, you can go back and read. This is basically 4 pages. This tells you a little bit more about the process analysis that I just sort of discussed and went over. We will come back to the grammar aspect. You do have a video about dangling misplaced modifiers. Again, if you read these pages, and when we go over the dangling and misplaced modifiers here momentarily, if you still are kind of struggling, I would go back and look at the video. There is a video on parallelism. I would watch that. We will probably talk a little bit more about that maybe next week. I'm not seeing a lot of issues with parallelism right now. They do start to creep up as we get later into the semester. I have seen issues on dangling and misplaced modifiers, so that's why we're going to talk a little bit more about that here momentarily. And we have, again, the essay topics. The Dinian piece, you do have a bio if you want to read about the author. You can read about Joan there. This is actually the essay. It's about 6 pages, give or take. It is a single space, so kind of keep that in mind. And then here's the assignment. Basically, you type in your answer. You can use Microsoft Word. The benefit of using Word again, of course, is you can proofread, spell check, grammar check, that type of deal. But this is the question that you have to answer. And again, about a good paragraph probably should be enough. Just be concise and answer the actual question. I know in some of these in the past, some of y'all are losing a little points because of spelling and grammar. You're not going back and actually proofreading and editing. Be careful. You may want to actually quote from the actual essay that you're reading. I know we haven't really talked a lot about how to go about quoting and that type deal, so we probably need to address that at some point, especially as we get closer to the research paper, when you're definitely going to need to know how to quote and have a works cited page. But a lot of times y'all are giving me blanket statements that you can back up your points by going back to the actual essay that you read for that week and inserting quotations that support your ideas. That's what I want to sort of see as analysis. Sometimes when I read these weekly reading assignments, it sounds like you're just giving me plot summary. You're just hatching out what the essay says. I've already read it multiple times. I already know what the essay says. I know what the author says. I really want to see your analysis addressing the actual question, not basically giving me your version of a Cliff Note version of what you just read. So be mindful of the grammar, the spelling, and make sure you're analyzing more so than giving me just summary. Because obviously Wikipedia is like a summary page. Cliff Notes is a summary page. Spark Notes is a summary page. If I want summary, I can easily just go to Spark Notes or Wikipedia and find summary of these works. I don't want summary. I want your analysis. So if you could please answer, and some of you are doing these really well, which is which is helpful. The weekly assignment is really there to sort of help you boost your grade up. So if you're having still a little bit of trouble with the essays, even though they're collectively the essays are 70%, these weekly assignments are 30%. So think about the peer reviews. The peer reviews should be really easy to do. You upload your paper, which that's 50% of your grade right there. So you're already at a 50 when you upload your paper. The other 50% comes with how well do you interact with your peers based on those peer review questions. And all honestly, everybody should be getting 100 on those. If you're not making 100, then there's something going on your end. Either you don't have your essay when you say you do, you're not coming in checking and seeing what you can do with those questions based on your partner's essay. But I'm trying to give you, as we move forward, a way to pull your grade up with some of these freebies. The weekly assignments is a little bit more challenging to get 100 on those because you actually have to read the work and then you really have to think about it by answering those questions. The essays are a little bit more tougher, especially when depending on your topic and when you start. Now, most of these essays you've had 2.5 weeks to do. If you wait 2 days before it's due, and know that you struggle in writing, then you probably going to set yourself up for not having a good grade because it's harder to make A's on essays if you're not sending to tutor.com, if you're not participating in the peer reviews, and if you're not sending me drafts. If you're waiting, 12 hours before you're sending the draft before it's due, it's hard for me to give you really good, positive, constructive feedback. And chances are, I mean, nobody wants to do last minute work. So, there's been times in other classes, the due date's on a Sunday, it's coming up 11:59, and I get people panicking and freaking out and trying to send me drafts at 9:30 at night on a Sunday. Chances are I'm not checking email until I get back to the office at 7:30 on Monday. So if you're waiting, 14, 15 days to get help, then that's shame on you because you've had all that time to get help from your peers online, from tutor.com, because they're pretty much 24/7. And for me, at least 4 days a week, 10-hour days. So kind of keep that in mind. Let's look at essay 3 topics. So this is the essay 3. Load this up again. MLA 9 format, that's never going to change. Time New Roman 12 font, double space, again 2 to 3 pages, 500 to 750 words. I'm pretty sure, and I have to go back, you can kind of double check for me with the checklist, but I believe this thing is going to be due on February 18th, which is a Sunday. This coming week is the 11th, so the week after that. So you basically have about 2.5 weeks with this. It may not take you 2.5 weeks to do this because it is process analysis. So you have 5 topics. Again, if you don't like my topics, if you have something in mind that you want to do that's better, that's easier, I would definitely go along those lines to do that particular topic. But you can always go to Google or whatever your favorite search engine is at the time. Put in process analysis essay topics. I'm going to show you how easy that is. Topics or lists. You got some right here that's being sort of generated for you. Some of them may be similar to what I have on mine. You will see some overlap. But here's one, 110 compelling process analysis essay topics for 2024. So if you want something a little bit more relevant, you can kind of look at some of these. Boy, got to go through all this cookie stuff. Here's some, for middle school, for high school, for college, science, psychology. If you're more in the psychology, here's one, how to control a panic attack, how to recover from PTSD. Here's one about information how to write an official email, how to pass your driving test. Here's funny, how to impress a girl, how to say I hate you without being mean. That could be interesting. How to stalk people on Facebook. I've had somebody actually write on that before. We got Valentine's Day coming up in about a week. Oh, excuse me. How to write a love letter. For those that like to cook, right? How to make brownies, how to make Alfredo sauce, how to separate egg yolks, how to make pepper steak, how to make a delicious turkey sandwich. You can replace turkey with ham or steak or chicken or whatever type of meat you want, veggie for anybody that's vegetarian. Um, Here's another one about food, how to avoid overeating. Sometimes when we are stressed, and especially at night when you got math or an essay or nursing or something due, we tend to go to the refrigerator and try to compress that stress by eating a whole bunch of unhealthy food sometimes, especially if it's after 11 or 12 o'clock at night. And now you're trying to get to bed because you got to get up by 6 or 7, and it's gonna hit your gut and kind of stay there, right? Um, how to use a food processor. What is the process of making cheese? Um, Complex processes. This could be a little bit more of a challenge, but it can be done. How do GPS systems work? How to build a house? What is the process of water purification? That could be sort of interesting. And then you got some easy ones. This is just one page of many. So if you have a hard time coming up with something that you don't like my ideas, but you still struggle with coming up with your own, go to Google and type in a process analysis essay topic list and go through. Here's another one: how to housebreak your dog, or you can say, "Hey, how to housebreak your cat." How to lose weight easily. How to get rid of shyness. How to organize your bedroom. How to pitch a tent. How to bathe a cat or a cat. That should be pretty interesting. Recipe for homemade ice cream. How to plan a perfect party. Now, the party could be, anniversary. It could be a kid's birthday party. It could be your birthday party. Could be a tailgating party. You're thinking about, Super Bowl and that type deal. Um, so the sky's the limit. And a lot of times you don't realize that we do a lot of the process analysis on a daily basis. So going back to the topics, I'm not going to read necessarily everything that comes after the boldface because I'm sure y'all can read. Number one is the art of effective time management. Some of y'all are having trouble in some of your online classes or classes, period, because you lack structure and time management. Now, that could be for a million different reasons. It could be that you got a lot on your plate. It could be that you're a single parent. It could be that you're really, really young and just can't manage your time wisely. Whatever the case may be, maybe you never been taught properly how to do it. I don't know if you can really be taught how to manage time. I think it just sort of, you kind of figure out what works best for you as you go through life. Now, again, I mean, if you're a procrastinator, which a lot of us are by nature, at some point that's going to come back and bite you in the butt. I mean, it always does. Time keeps marching forth, whether we want it to or not. That deadline's going to come up, whether we want it to come up or not. It's just that's how life is. That bill is coming up in a couple of weeks at the end of the month. I mean, it's just we have to deal with it. And there's consequences when we don't deal with it. So, I mean, if you don't pay your bills, well, what happens? Well, you get charged maybe with a late fee. If it becomes a repeating pattern, besides the late fee, they just shut off your stuff. And if you're renting or something like that, well, you got somebody coming on probably day 6 or day 7, giving you a eviction notice, and they're fixing to throw you and all your stuff out on the street. That's not a good feeling. When you're late when it comes to schoolwork, well, you get an F on the assignment or a 0. You get too many Fs or zeros, and you're basically going to fail the class, have to come back and repay, take time, and come back, which that's never fun either. If you're late at work, you might get written up a couple times, you might get talked to. Eventually, it's going to start cutting into that weekly or biweekly check, Eventually, if the manager or the higher ups start seeing it as being a problem, they're just going to let you go. And now you're really in trouble because let's say you don't have enough money to make that rent or make that phone bill in 2 days because you just got fired. The job market is kind of hard sometimes. You don't find jobs right away real quickly. They sometimes like to drag on. You might put an application in today thinking you're going to get a call because you got the qualifications at least by Monday. Well, here it is 4 Mondays later, and rent is due tomorrow because tomorrow is March 1st, and you don't have any money. Um, So you can think about exploring different ways to manage your time. Like it says here, explore the strategies and techniques. Maybe creating schedules, maybe setting priorities, maybe using time tracking tools. Maybe talk about avoid common time wasting pitfalls, right? That could be easily as scrolling YouTube shorts to be, watching whatever your favorite binge watching movie or television show on Hulu. It could be scrolling on your phone, on Facebook. There's a lot of different ways. You know your time management better than most. That could be something easy to focus on because you can also be giving not only other people advice, but maybe giving yourself advice. Follow your own advice so you can avoid, you know, racking up a couple zeros on assignments because you just forgot that they were due, or um, maybe saving money because on the next paycheck, you really need to have all that check, maybe actually going into work and not coming in late 4 times a week. You'll have more money when it comes pay period. Number two is really interesting. I've had a lot of folks do this, especially if you're a coffee drinker. You can kind of, not necessarily use coffee. You can use tea, you can use beer, wine, whatever the case may be. But it's basically from bean to brew, the coffee and brewing process. Now, it gives you a couple of different methods that you can analyze: the pour over, the French press, the espresso. You can focus on those if you want, each individually, but you don't have to. You can pick if you want to go with the French press method. Tell me the steps of that, because a lot of students sometimes will try to do all three, and that's fine. If you think I mean, usually doing all three would give you more than 3 pages, is what I'm getting at. If you want to write and continue to write, then do all three. If you just want to sort of keep within the 2 to 3 page limit, then I would just pick one of these brewing methods and give the methods or the steps to that. Number three is a little bit probably going to be more of a challenge. You may have to actually go out and do a little bit of research. Is navigating the scientific method, a case study approach. So if you're a science-based person, chemistry, biology, you may really like this. But again, if you don't know too much about it, but still want the challenge, you're definitely going to have to go out to Google and do a little bit of research. You may have to do a little bit of research for most of these. You don't have to. I think at least with number one, you probably don't have to do a whole heck of a lot of research because again, like I said, most of us are all procrastinators. We could probably use some helpful hints on our own time management. Even I could probably need some helpful hints on my time management at times, especially when you are working full time and you got 2 kids and a wife and trying to grade and juggle 5 or 6 classes that you're teaching. It gets kind of chaotic. Same way as your household, if you got 5 or 6 different things that you're juggling in a week. Um, Number four, mastering the art of persuasive public speaking. How many people like to do public speaking? Not a lot. Some of y'all might be taking a public speaking class through the college now. This could be sort of helpful because you can kind of give yourself advice. You can kind of take the public speaking out. You could also put mastering the art of persuasive writing if you want to go that way with it. Again, you may have to look up a little bit of research, but I mean, a lot of this you probably kind of know if you just really sit down and start brainstorming and thinking about it. And then number five, DIY, do it yourself home energy efficiency upgrades. You don't necessarily have to focus on the energy aspect of it. You can just focus on the upgrades. Let's say you're trying to upgrade your backyard to have a pool and a trampoline. Or let's say you're trying to upgrade inside your house to maybe have another bedroom, maybe Maybe you have a grandmother, you want to have a grandmother or mother-in-law suite that you want to try to build. So you have a lot of different avenues that you can pick here. You want to pick a topic that you kind of know, like I said, like like the back of your hand. But at the same time, you're not going to be shortchanging your audience, your peers or me, with the methods and the steps to get there. So you want to list all that stuff out as best you can. Each one of your steps, if you plan on doing the directional approach, each one of your steps can be a paragraph. So step one may be 2 or 3 sentences. That's fine. That's a paragraph. Step two may be 2 or 3 sentences. Hey, that's fine. That's a paragraph. So depending on how many steps you have is going to depend on how many body paragraphs you have. If you have 10 steps, then you have 10 body paragraphs, basically. You have an introduction and a conclusion that makes 12 paragraphs. You probably don't need that many, depending on what you're trying to do. But I could probably say when you double space it with 12 steps, you're probably already at 3 pages. The other thing is, and I don't necessarily want to promote this too much, but if you can say what you need to say, if you can tell the steps that you need to explain, if you can do that in 1 page, meaning whoever picked up that particular paper could read it, follow your steps, and basically produce the same exact results like you did, then you can stop at page 1 if you only need to do 1 page. Chances are you're going to have to go to 2 pages because, like I said in the past, it's usually those that have 2 to 3 pages that have a really good chance of making the A's and B's. So I would sort of, at least stick to 2 pages. If you need to go to 3, then go to 3. If you really think you can say what you need to say, double spaced and all in 1, you can try it. But it all depends on what you're trying to do. All right, let's look at the modifiers. So a dangling modifier is a word or a phrase describing a subject that is missing from the sentence. This can lead the reader to misinterpret what the author means and apply the modifier to the wrong subject. Usually this can be fixed by adding the missing subject back. Yes, that's usually what you need. You may have to change some of the verb tense and add a couple more things into that sentence. So let's look at some of the examples of sentences with dangling modifiers. Usually anytime you have an ing, what they call present participle at the beginning of a sentence, chances are you're going to have a dangling modifier because usually you have that ing word and then you have followed by a comma. But if you look here, they give you sort of a X, meaning it's a DM or dangling modifier, and the check mark is how you correct it. It says, because this sentence is missing a subject in the first clause, this would be the first clause, there's no subject there. A cameo was studying in the library, which probably wasn't what the writer meant. So here, as I was studying in the library, cameo crashed studying. So by adding the phrase as I was, the modifier has been connected with the subject it describing, I. So you need to have sort of the subject there. Here it didn't have any subject. Here's another one. My mother dropped me off at college at 18 years old. Well, this sentence is a dangling modifier because it says at 18 years old makes it unclear who was 18. Was it the mother? Which that would be kind of weird. Or was it the actual son or daughter that was 18? We just don't know where the 18 is. It coming to the kid or is it coming to the mother? Because how can you be a mother and drop your 18-year-old son or daughter off, basically both being 18? And that's what it says here in the explanation. Because we're missing a subject, we don't know who is 18 years old. So to fix that, my mother dropped me off at college when I was 18 years old. So in this version, it's clear that the speaker was 18 years old. By adding the subject, it's less likely that someone will misinterpret your meaning. And sometimes when that meaning gets misinterpreted, it becomes a humorous statement. Here's another one. Before waking up, the cat jumped on the bed. While the writer likely didn't mean that the cat jumped while asleep because the subject is missing from the opening modifier, it might be read that way. So again, If you look, we have a pronoun, we have a subject. Before I woke up, the cat jumped on my bed. Once again, adding subject to your modifying phrase, which is this part of the sentence, will help fix any dangling modifier. So by adding the I, we now know that a speaker was asleep, not the cat. So again, yes, if your cat's asleep, how is it jumping on itself to wake itself up? It doesn't make any sense. Misplaced modifiers, while a dangling modifier is missing the subject, a misplaced modifier is simply put too far away from the subject it describes. This makes it easy to misinterpret a sentence and put the descriptor with the wrong subject. Most often, the way to fix this is simply to move the modifier closer to the subject it describes. So again, think of it like a jigsaw puzzle. You're trying to move the pieces to go and fit and create that puzzle. Same thing with a MM or a misplaced modifier. So we look here again, we got the same deal, X and check. The chef saw a rat making pasta. Now, I don't know about you unless you're living in New York and watch the news, where you see a lot of rats that are crawling up people's legs and eating out of their mouths, and really big sewer rats. So unless there's a ratatouille up in New York or in your backyard somewhere, chances are you're not seeing a rat or Splinter from Ninja Turtles. You're not seeing a rat cook pasta or cook anything for that matter. If you have rats that big in your house, you've got more problems than most, and you probably need to get the hell out. So it's not the rat that's making the pasta too. Well, logically, we'll tell it's the cook, it's the chef. And that's what it sort of says here. So to fix that, we need to make what we need to modify. So while making pasta, the chef saw a rat. That makes more sense. You will probably see that more in restaurants, right? If you go to a Chinese place, Chinese person's making the noodles, they may see the rat there instead of having rat cook your noodles for you. The sparkling dentist tools lay on the table. So it says here in this sentence, the modifying word sparkling, and because right now it's next to dentist, it would seem as though the dentist is sparkling. That's not the case. So you have to move that around. The dentist's sparkling tools lay on the table. Now that makes sense because it's the tools that are sparkling, not the actual person. Bucky the Bronco wore shoes for his hooves that were too small. So again, it says, because the modifying phrase has been placed next to hooves, a reader might think that Bucky's feet, not the shoes, are the things that are too small. So they just reword that. They do the jigsaw puzzle deal. Bucky the Bronco wore shoes that were too small for his hooves. So as it says here, the explanation, by moving the modifier too small to the middle of the sentence next to the shoes, it is clear that the shoes are too small for Bucky. That, in a nutshell, is dangling the misplaced modifiers. Now, again, you have some exercise in your book. If you want to sort of practice that a little bit more, you can. What I would suggest, because your grammar check, right, the Microsoft editor and spell check and grammar check, it's not going to pick up dangling modifiers and misplaced modifiers. They haven't gotten that advanced yet to do it. If you're using Grammarly, then the paid version will sometimes pick those up, but the free version won't. In other words, you're just going to have to kind of remind yourself and remember how to spot a dangling modifier and misplaced modifier and how to basically fix those. Not only for yourself, but maybe during your peer reviews, because otherwise you're not going to find a program right now that's going to help you determine what a dangling or misplaced modifier is without your own knowledge. So let's see here. This is the particular question. It says, has modern technology such as social media and blogs changed how people write to make notebooks and journal things of the past? Discuss the relevance of Dignon's essay in our electronic age. So again, you're going to have to read this piece to really be able to answer that. But I can give you a little bit of a, outline. This could be something too. When you think about outlining for essay 3, this is the outline of this particular essay. When we look at this, you got to ask the question of why do we tell stories, right? This is going back to that first 2 weeks of the semester. You did essay 1, which was narrative narration. What's the purpose of telling a story? Why do people do it? Um, some folks in my other classes says, it's to keep the history alive from one particular person to the other, from one particular family member to the other, from one generation to the other. And that's true, right? You want to do oral history, think of oral history, going back to like Anglo-Saxon times, Beowulf times. If you read Beowulf in 12th grade or something, you probably know about the whole deal of the folk tales. A lot of stuff was orally. It was verbal. They didn't have a lot of stuff to write down. They didn't have notebooks. They didn't have, voice recorders or video. They didn't have phones to videotape things. They couldn't really take pictures. So they told it orally, or, they drew in cave walls or on cave walls. So the purpose of keeping a notebook, I mean, you can kind of read what the author's purpose was, but you may have a different purpose. I mean, you may have a similar purpose. Keeping a notebook helps you day-to-day activities. Maybe it helps you stay on track. Maybe it helps you, sort of be that person that does provide the history to the next generation, right? To your kids, who will hopefully tell your grandkids, which would be their kids, maybe what grandma and grandpa, your mom and dad told you. So that's the only way it's going to get, passed over. I mean, you can say videos, photographs, yes, but somebody still needs to be able to talk about that history. Just seeing a photograph is not going to mean much if you don't know the backstory behind it. And then we get really, you can kind of combine 2 and 3 here, because we get to the point where what are notebooks and what notebooks are not. We have the difference between the public and private consumption. So again, going back to that notebook, maybe if you were a female, but going back to when you were in kindergarten, first grade, or second grade, if you had the one that had the lock to it, you had the key, you hid from your parents, you hid from your siblings. Sometimes you lost it. But there was a reason why you kept it locked, you kept it private. No matter how deep the thoughts were at 5, which again, is probably just a bunch of Scrabble and a couple pictures, but for you, it was private. There was something going on during that day or during that time that you decided to take that pen or that crayon and put it on paper. Now we have a lot of different ways how we can lock our stuff. You can create a Microsoft Word file that could be basically your notebook. You can have a password lock on that where nobody else can get in unless they knew the password. If you have Facebook, pretty much whatever you post, you can decide whether you want the public at large, anybody else that has a Facebook account, look at your post, or you can set it up for private, only you, or you can set it up for only a selective amount of friends to look at it. So that's sort of where, I mean, you think about it, notebook, we have books or book at the end of note, same thing, Facebook. You have the ability to determine how much public compared to how much private you want to have go on. Same thing with X, Twitter, I guess, is the same deal, Instagram. Think of the collection of thoughts, fragments of the mind. Sometimes when you're driving down the road, you're listening to some music, you're trying to decompress from the day, you got thoughts running through your head. Sometimes when you are waking up in the morning, you have the same sort of thoughts continuing, or when you're trying to go to sleep at night. That's why a lot of folks have to have certain sleep medications, because their head is so much racing. It's hard to fall asleep before it's time to get up again. And by that time, you're already exhausted because you stayed up all night thinking about all this stuff going on in your head. So that's why it might be, if we get down to here, record your observations. Talk about your 5 senses. Again, this is where essay 2 now comes back in, right? The description essay. jot down what I see, what I hear, what I remember, what I think. So sometimes keeping a little bit of, a notepad or something around, you can depress your mind. You can sort of, if you regurgitate or just, call it what it is, diarrhea on paper. If you need to throw up your ideas on paper, do so. Because maybe, I mean, by doing that, it will reduce some of your anxiety, some of your stress. You won't feel so much of the world on your shoulders. Your chest won't feel like it's about to cave in and implode. Your heart, because of your blood pressure, won't be blowing up on you. So you got to find other ways that's going to work for you that are one, cheap, and two, doesn't they really don't take a whole lot of time to sit down and say, hey, I'm going to take 15 minutes and I'm just going to jot or type something down just to get it off my mind, get it off my heart, get it off my chest. I mean, because the other alternative is putting your face or your hand through a wall, and that's going to hurt. That's going to be costly, and you're probably going to get law enforcement involved, which that could be time consuming if you got to sit in jail because you can't fix a wall that you just put your head through. Um, so you want to think of smart ways of getting your stress out. And sometimes creating that notebook helps. Why keep a notebook? So again, clarify thoughts. A notebook won't be going away as long as you continue to, type your thoughts or write your thoughts down. Um, Discover connections. You can look at patterns of ideas. What works well in the past? What didn't work well in the past? If what you're doing for this, like writing essays in high school didn't get you really good grades in high school, then I wouldn't be that would be one pattern and one red flag that would be, hey, I'm not going to do what I did in 11th and 12th grade for this college English class because I got C's and D's on those papers. I want to make A's and B's on this one. So I know if I do that particular way, those patterns, then I'm not going to get the results I want. I didn't get them then. So how's that going to change now? So, I mean, you want to look at different connections there. Uh, Record of life's moments. Each time that you use Facebook where you're taking pictures or sharing pictures, when you go to vacation, generally you take pictures. You may take videos. You may buy something for a little memento purposes, sort of like maybe getting a coffee mug or maybe pajamas, something, right? You're just not going to go to the Bahamas for a week and not buy something and bring back for remembrance. You're just not going to go to LA with your kids and not take pictures of some of, the Hollywood Walk of Fame. I mean, you're just not going to do that. I mean, I don't know too many people that go on vacation that don't bring something back, whether it's pictures or whether it's some sort of, something they bought. Otherwise, what's the purpose of going on vacation? You can just do that in your backyard, right? Um, you probably do on the weekends. But anyway, it's a day to day, right? You can use a notebook day to day. You can use it weekly. You can use it monthly. You can use it quarterly. You can use it yearly. It's so much that you put down from your mind that you can't capture in a video or in a photograph. Sometimes you need background, you need content, you need context that logically fits the moment of what's going on. Because I mean, you can't take a video or a picture every day or every second of every minute of your life. One, you don't have that much memory in your phone, and two, it's just going to be, what's the purpose? But you can write, all right? You can take 10 minutes each hour and write down something that's going on for that day. Thank you. Got to do the trash. But anyway, that's a good way to keep your ideas in check, sort of keep your reality in check. You reflect on your day. You reflect on Monday so to help Tuesday become better. You reflect on Tuesday to help Wednesday. If you're not reflecting before going to bed, or at least waking up in the morning, you probably should, because if stuff is not going your way from one day to the next, And you need to find the patterns. You need to find a connection. You need to come to an understanding of how is that? Because it's not always the person next to you that's causing that problem. 50% of that problem is the person you see in the mirror each time you wake up and each time you go to bed. The other 50% could be, other people, could be, environmental stuff. It could be settings. It could be the wrong city. It could be the wrong people. But 50% of it's probably going to be on you. I mean, let's just face it. You control which way you go, left or right. The person in front of you can't always control which way you go, left or right. Now they can sort of hinder you, right? They can get in your way if you're trying to go left and they're blocking you. But initially, you had the idea you had to go left because left, you have to turn left to go home, or you have to turn right to go to work, or you have to go straight to go to the grocery store. Um, but keeping a notebook will help you maintain self-awareness. And that's why you might, if you don't keep a notebook or if you don't start jotting your ideas or, use your cell phone. You can use the microphone and tape yourself. Certain programs now, I think they're called, there's one called Dragon. You can use a headset and you can go to Microsoft Word and sit there and basically type out your thoughts and it'll type it for you. Some folks are using that now to basically type their essay. They're basically verbalizing their essay. Of course, you have to go back and make sure things are spelled correctly in the grammar because sometimes I won't always put commas and stuff where it needs to go. But that could be something to invest in, especially if you're tired at night and you don't feel like typing. You can put that headset on and let your voice, let the words and stuff just flow out of your head onto the screen at that point. And then you can save it. You can come back and look at it. You can change some stuff up, but there would be a record. There would be a date. And then you can come back. That's why sometimes when you look at these memory pages, sometimes when you log in into Facebook, it pops up memories that happened a year ago, 6 months ago, 4 years ago, 11 years ago, depending on how long you've had Facebook. And sometimes it's just the picture. And depending on what the picture is, we can say, oh, yeah, I kind of remember what was going on during that time, 11 years ago. And then sometimes you need sort of the content and the context. Hopefully, you put a little blurb maybe of what was going on. Maybe it was your granddaughter's 7th birthday party, and you put a little description about what was going on. And that sort of, that will bring us back in some ways. We can kind of time travel with memories. But at the same time, you can kind of time travel back to the past with your thoughts on paper. That's why you might want to think about doing some notebooking. If nothing else, maybe for your own kids' sake, maybe they can, as you get older into 50s, 60s, and 70-year old, and your kids start to become 30 and 40, maybe they can start looking back in your notebooks and realizing, what was going on during life, not only during your time when you were still young, but also when they were growing up, because you are aging. And we all know this, you're aging while your kids are also maturing and aging as well. It's something that they can keep as a keepsake and they can pass it down to their children, which would be your grandchildren, and they can kind of share, right? You can have family recipes in those. I had a student earlier today actually talk about, I think he said his grandfather or a great grandfather was in World War II, got captured, was put into the concentration camps for 2 years. So I guess it was from like 1943 to 1945. And he had like a dollar bill that he sort of wrote his experience. Like he kept dates, he kept numbers, right? Because he didn't know, back in World War II, we didn't have all the fancy stuff like the internet and the 24-hour news and all this. You just didn't, when you got captured, you could pretty much maybe call it a day because you didn't know how long you were going to live, whether you were going to see any type of family members, let alone the United States again. But he was able to get out of that because the war ended. And I think he saved that dollar, and the grandfather gave it to the student's father, who then since gave it to him because he got old enough. So that dollar has been in the family, basically from grandfather, father, now son. So you think, 1943, and here it is, it's 2024. Let's see if we can do the math here. I mean, that's a good bit of time for that dollar to remain. That's nearly 81 years. It's going on 100. Um, but that's something that this particular student, now the son, if he has kids, he could pass it on to his son or daughter. And something simple like that, the outsider would just see, oh, that's just an old dollar from 1943. But to that particular family, there's history. Because I mean, think about it. If the father wasn't able to, or the grandfather wasn't able to get back home to the United States, he may not have, met the grandmother to produce the father, who could give the father, get the dollar to his current son. So a lot of things could have happened there. And even though that wasn't, he was notebooking, he was doing his entries on that dollar bill. If you think about it, he was writing his numbers, he was counting his days, um, and that's all he had. That, and maybe for that could have been for those 2 years, that was the only thing that was sort of keeping him going too, because he could have something to fill up on a dollar bill that maybe would give him some sort of hope, of going home. And fortunately for him, the war ended and he was able to get back to the United States and start the family, and, everything else was sort of history. So think about that while you're reading that particular piece, while you're answering that particular question for Sunday. And as you start thinking about rough drafting for the peer review next week, and then finalizing for the 18th essay 3. With that in mind, I think I've talked enough. You're probably tired of hearing me. I don't blame you. I'm getting kind of hungry. I know they're doing some Valentine's card deal that the student activity director is coming around the campuses. I don't know how many people actually come to campus for classes, but I would check your email for things like that. They're usually free. Sometimes there's some goodies involved where you can, have a snack. Sometimes they provide pizza. This one is a Valentine's Day card where you come and create your own Valentine's Day card, which if you're a very creative person, it could save you some money, because we know Valentine's Day is a big money maker, and the cards are not necessarily cheap, not even at the dollar store anymore. So um, that might be something you might want to kind of keep in mind. I think they have a couple more days, being that maybe one more day, Thursday. I don't know where they're going to be tomorrow, but double check your email. They should have sent that out to everybody if you want to participate in that. Otherwise, I will try to grade SA2 as swiftly as I can. Bear with me. I do have 4 other classes. Some of them have tests and essays and quizzes and stuff coming in. So I try to grade. I try to go a little bit here, a little bit there. If you turn something in, it will be graded. I try to get it back if possible before the next one, just because, you would like to have the feedback, and I understand that. But just bear with me, um, because I'm having to travel a couple days to a high school and then come back and teach a class. So I try, a good bit of my grading happens over the weekend. But of course there I'm trying to spend time with the wife and the kids too, and that's a juggle. Uh, but that's also part of the gig. So, it's not giving any excuses. It's just I like to sort of take my time. If you looked at some of the SA1 comments, I usually try to give you decent, positive, constructive feedback. So if maybe if there is a fault. Maybe I give too much comments, too much suggestions, too much feedback. And that could be part of the reason, because I'm doing that for about 4 or 5 other classes, that it takes a little bit of time. But I'll also want you to get the logic and the reason and the fairness behind why you got the grade you got. I don't just want to read it and give it a grade and move on. I want to give you some content, some context, and some substance, so you can take it and you can either use that to improve on the next one, or you can take it and be mad and, want to throw a fist at your computer or whatever the case may be. But when I give comments, it's there constructive purpose reasons. It's to make you a better writer, better student, better critical, analytical reader, thinker, writer, because this writing stuff's not going to go away. Depending on how far you want to go in college, you're going to be writing something probably once, twice, if not multiple times every semester in a particular class. It may not be 4 or 5 page essays, or it may be 4 or 5 page essays. Who knows? But definitely, you're going to be writing, you're going to be typing, you're going to be communicating in a way that you need to know how to do it. So I try to give the best possible feedback that I can. And usually I can do a good bit of that if you send me drafts as well. Now, again, I have folks, 4 or 5 other classes sending me drafts. So it usually comes first come, first serve. Just keep in mind, if you send drafts like a day or so before the essays due, I can't guarantee that I can get back to you with that draft, or at least give you the best possible feedback had you sent that draft 4 days earlier. I mean, you just have to kind of keep that in mind too. I'm only human as well. Um, but anyway, I hope everybody has a great rest of the week. Um, you can email me. You can send me something via Teams. I did create that virtual Teams classroom. If you go back and look, probably the first week or two of your email, you should have it. You just have to sort of, uh, invite yourself to it, so I can go in there and click that you are able to come in. That's just another way that you can kind of stay up to date with stuff. If you need to send me something quick, I can answer it back. If something's going on with email, that type deal. But anyway, have a great rest of your Wednesday. Have a great week 5 and week 6 ahead. Let me know if you need any help or on anything. Let me know if you want to start sending me drafts of essay 3. And as I say, I will be working swiftly on getting the essay 2 description essays back to you as quickly as I can. And go 49ers. I kind of like that team a little bit better. Living out in California for a while, the 49ers back in 92, 93, they were a pretty good team back then. Had some good players. So a lot of memories of 49ers back in 92, 93 while living in California. But anyway, have a great weekend. Be safe. And until next week, just drop me an email, send me a line, whatever the case may be. Adios, amigos.